Hi everyone, my name is Joanna Earthlight. Today in our physical science class, as you know, we'll be doing middle school science and our topic will be physical properties of matter. There's some essential questions that we want to know by the end of this lesson. The first question is, what is physical property of matter? When you hear the word property there, don't think of just something you own. It's talking about the physical features of matter. How do you describe it? Now, our next question is to list some examples of physical properties. And by the end of this lesson, you should be able to compare and contrast two things. For example, we're going to look at an apple and an orange. Now, what are physical properties? Okay, you go to the kitchen, you're washing the dishes, and this is the first thing that turned up. What does it look like? It's round and it's blue. So those are the two physical properties of that first plate that you get to wash. Then, as you wash further, you'll see something looking like this. What's that? That's square and it's yellow. Those are two other physical properties. So far, you can see that the color of the plates are one physical property, and then the shapes are another. Okay, what do you use to wash these plates? You might be using some sponge. If you're using a sponge, you'll see that it's soft and the plates are hard. So hardness is another example of physical property. So these are just some examples of physical properties of matter. Now, as you go further, you're going to ask, what is physical property of matter? A physical property of matter are properties that can be measured or observed without the matter changing. So you could measure it, you could observe it, and it's not going to change. Basically, if you look at these cups of water, you could observe to see that one cup has less than the other. And you could look at it and say, hey, Mom, can I have some water? Oh, she poured some water for my little brother, but she gave him more than me. You're able to observe that based on the measurement of the water that's in the glass. So that's another physical property. You're able to look at it and you're able to measure it, observe it, and it didn't change. Now, physical properties are typically things that you can detect with your senses. You could see it, you could smell it. You could even feel it, right? So, for example, you can see, hear, smell, or feel something, and then you could detect that sponge was soft, right? Remember the sponge? It was soft and it had a different texture than the plates. So these plates are hard. You are able to feel the different textures. So that's how you're able to detect physical properties using your senses. Look at this guy. He's ripping up his homework. His boss or his manager might have said, "Hey, that was not done properly." He got so mad he started ripping up all the paper. But guys, even though he ripped all the paper, it's still paper. So the physical properties does not change. And that's what it was saying here. You're able to, even though the papers are smaller, you rip it up and it's smaller, but the physical property of it did not change. It is still paper, even though they are just in smaller pieces. So remember that when something, it's basically different ways. Let me go back to that other. So basically, I want you to remember, guys, that physical properties are typically things that can be detected with your senses. You're able to observe it and maybe measure it, and it does not change. These are some other examples of physical property. So here we have odor. Oh my God, look at this lady. She's sniffing her armpits. She's getting an odor. Odor usually means smell. So that's one. When your mom is cooking a nice meal and you're upstairs, you may be able to smell it from upstairs. So the odor is traveling to your nose. So that's one physical property or one example of physical property. Another example of physical property is boiling point. If you observe this picture here, it's 100 degrees and the water is boiling. We also should be able to see another example of physical property, which is conduct heat. The fire here is conducting heat to the pan, which is conducting heat to the water. So physical property, another example is conduct heat. Another example of physical properties being able or the ability to conduct electricity. If we look here, we're seeing two wires and it's conducting electricity. And this is useful when you're able to plug your cell phone in or charge your computer. All these are physical properties when the wires are able to conduct the electricity. Another example here is the ability to dissolve in another substance, or we could say dissolvability or solubility. Here we see some candy dissolving in the water. Wow, you can see the different colors. So the red candy, the color that the color that's changed in the water to is red. The green candy is changing the color to green. The blue candy is changing the watercolor to blue, and so forth. We can see the orange one and the yellow one here. So please remember these words, guys. Dissolvability or solubility. They all mean the same thing, and it's the ability to dissolve in other substances. Okay, guys, let's look at the physical property of matter here. And it's very useful. We want to know that studying science is very useful to know. Because here, this guy is pouring some coolant in his radiator. Let me get this out of the way. So he is doing this because the radiator fluid, the coolant, has a freezing point that is lower than the freezing point of water. So that is why it's better to put coolant in your car than water. Because if it's in the wintertime, you park outside and it's freezing outside, then the water in your radiator is going to freeze. So because water freezes at 0 degrees, if you use a coolant in your car, it's better because then it will take a longer time to freeze because it has a lower freezing point. And freezing point is another example of physical property. Now let's go across to this picture here. It's talking about ductile. What's that word? See, here we have the copper wires. Inside the wires in a lot of our appliances, we have copper. Copper is a good conductor of electricity. So other than conducting electricity, a lot of people, they will bend and stretch this copper into different things that they could use to make jewelry or whatever. So the ability for the wire to be able to be bent and stretched is called ductility. Or we could say that the wire is ductile. It's able to be stretched and bent and sometimes flattened. They beat it out and flatten it and stretch it and bend it. So that's ductility. Okay, guys, so we have covered everything. We looked at all the different properties of matter, and now let's review. What is physical property of matter? So we should know by now that the physical properties of matter are the properties or the features that can be measured or observed without changing that matter, right? So the substance doesn't change. And we gave the example of paper being ripped. It's smaller, but the properties of this paper did not change because it's still paper, no matter how small it is. Right? So another question is, list some examples of physical properties. We have odor. We talk about the smell of something. The boiling point, right? We talk about the freezing point. Conducting electricity. Conduct heat. I have that twice. I'm sorry, guys. But remember, conductive electricity is an example of a physical property. Dissolvability or solubility, that's being able to dissolve in something. Then we have ductility. This is when the metals are able to be bent and stretched. Right? So those are just some examples of physical properties of matter. Now, our next question, we'll be talking about how to compare and contrast an apple and an orange. Right? Just to compare and contrast an apple and an orange. Guys, remember that in comparing and contrasting in language, it's the same thing everywhere. So this is integrated. So here we have an orange. If we should look at it, it's orange in color and it has a thick peel on there. The apple, on the other hand, in contrast, is red and it has a thin peel on it. And for both of them, if we should compare both, they're both fruits and they both can be juiced and they both grow on trees. So those are some comparisons here, and these are the contrasts. So, and if we talk about physical properties, one is thick, one is thin. We could observe the color, we could drink the juice, we could taste it. So those are some of the physical properties that we could talk about when we look at an apple and an orange. Now you go ahead, go find two things in your house or wherever and compare and contrast both of them. I hope you enjoyed this lesson, guys. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, and thank you all for watching. Have a great day.